Hello and welcome to Stock Journal Panel Discussions. Today we're looking at dairy. I'm Elizabeth Anderson and with me is the South Australian Dairy Farmers Association CEO Andrew Curtis.
Good morning.
Director of the Australian Dairy Conference and Meningie Share Farmer Beck Middleton.
Morning.
And Dairy SA Chairman and Mount Compass Dairy Farmer Michael Connor.
Morning.
Thank you for joining me today. So the state of the dairy industry is something that gets spoken about a lot, particularly in the past 12 months. How would you characterise it? Michael, start with you.
So I think now, I think the demand for milk and the new season's pricing is a bit better than last year, so I'm feeling like there's a little bit of confidence going into this next year. We've been on the back of a long-term tough spot for dairy and none tougher than the year just gone. So to me, I think there's improvement in confidence.
Would you agree with that, Beck?
Yeah, I think there's some cautious optimism and there's a bit of hope there. I think there is still some financial pain being felt by a lot of people, but hopefully this year's pricing will help to alleviate at least some of that, and hopefully going into the future again we'll be looking at some improvement in milk pricing.
Andrew, is it quite as bad as what people had feared for the past little while?
Oh, certainly the past little while has been very challenging. A couple of really dry seasons put a lot of pressure on the system, and followed by last year, which, as Michael said, was just really tough from a price point of view. But I think cautious optimism is a good way to capture where people are at. But we recognise that there's variability. There's some people that are able to come out of the last few years in a reasonably good place, but there are others who still feel trapped by the circumstances of the last, particularly the last year.
Yeah. So part of that improvement is through the global market. It does seem to be improving. Is that being felt at the producer level? We'll start with you this time, Beck.
I think certainly bigger and Warrnambool cheese tend to reflect global prices pretty well. There's a little bit of variability in the opening prices for this year, but I mean it tends to tally up reasonably well with Dairy Australia's situation and outlook report of a sort of indicative price of about $6 a kilo for the season. So fingers crossed we don't have any more hiccups.
Andrew?
I think so. I think there is some reflection. There is a delay, and that's frustrating from a producer's point of view, that there is a delay between what we're hearing about movement in international levels and what is actually seen. But again, I agree with Beck that the prices that are being offered by the major processors indicate a better international level.
And Michael?
And I think the demand for milk indicates that there's a brighter outlook for that. I think there's a bit of silence from processors. I'd like to hear a bit more long-term outlook on how the market outlook could affect Australia and how we could capitalise on that, and what our level of production would be better if it was, and a bit more feedback from processors would add to that. But directly on the farm gate price, there's a delay, isn't there? There always is.
Yeah, that was part of the issue with Murray Goulburn, wasn't it? That you were being told one thing, but the situation was actually completely different. Yeah. So that there does need to be that transparency.
I think so. Yep.
Where do you think the biggest areas for improvement are in the industry? Andrew, this time?
Some clarity in the signals is one of the big opportunities. We have the ability to produce a lot more milk and to make some good management decisions around producing more milk, but there needs to be the opportunity for more than cautious optimism. You know, there needs to be some signals that say it is appropriate to be able to invest in management, invest in infrastructure, invest in land, and invest in cows, because it's a big risk if there isn't a signal and there's an expectation that it all sits on the dairy farmer to make those decisions on their own, then it's a big risk. So that, to me, that's the big opportunity, is clearer signals.
Yeah. And Michael, as a dairy farmer, what would you like to see?
Some longer term outlook. So back to before, from processors, some longer term. So there's been a change in the way dairy operates and the way processors view suppliers, and it's a lot short term, and it's a very volatile environment, and a lot of processor changing and unsettled feeling at a farm level. So I think the improvement could be clearing that up a bit, and if this is the new way of doing business, it's up to us as farmers to focus on our own business and move ourselves into that new way of thinking. But that it's the settling the unsettled is the opportunity going forward to use what's available to us, I think.
So what would you like to see improve in the dairy industry?
So I would like to see more collaboration between processors and farmers, more of a partnership rather than the sort of disposable nature that, processors tend to look at farmers as, down here somewhere, whereas, it needs to be more of a business partnership where they're seen as equals and they're treated respectfully and they're communicated with effectively. I think that communication and transparency is really a major issue at the moment, and therefore there's a lack of trust. And so that puts everybody on tenterhooks, and people can't make good business decisions if they don't know what the future holds. So yeah, that longer term forecasting and just being open and honest. If the global market looks like it's going to go, then the processors need to get on and tell people straight away so that they can budget and plan. I think that was a major downfall last year with what happened with the milk crash and the clawbacks. So if people had known when it was actually happening, what was going on, they might not have bought that extra load of hay. They might have tightened the belts a little earlier in the season, and people wouldn't have potentially been in as much financial pain as they ended up in. So,
well, as you said about dairy farmers as expendable, I mean, obviously we've lost quite a few dairy farmers in the past decade. South Australia currently has about 250 dairy farms. Is that a fair figure?
228 or something more likely, I think.
So it's dropped even more. So obviously there's not that new number of dairy farmers that are necessarily coming in to pick up the slack if people leave.
I think they could turn around with some confidence.
Yeah.
I think that could turn around.
As a young person, it is very hard to get in because it's not a cheap enterprise. Even a small dairy and a small herd will set you back over $1 million. And if you don't have confidence that you're going to have the milk price to pay for that debt, you'd have to be mad, basically, to go into that much debt with no certainty for the future.
Within agriculture, there's been a lot of productivity gains coming through new technology. Beck, you've obviously someone on the dairy farm you work on, there's a lot of new technology coming in. What do you think has the most potential in the dairy industry?
So as far as new technology goes, there's no silver bullet. There's no one-size-fits-all technology that's going to improve everything out of sight. But I think if you look at the three sort of key cost areas in dairy businesses of feed, power and probably water, particularly for people who irrigate, any technological gain, so you're talking precision agriculture, anything that can improve feed efficiencies, that can improve water efficiencies and keep power costs low, so things like solar and wind power on farms so that people become, they have a self-replacing power supply, that kind of thing that reduces your cost of production would have serious implications, I think, in a positive way.
Because obviously power is one of the biggest costs for dairy farmers?
Feed is the biggie, and then power is up there as well. And I think water security is another big one, but we can't do a huge amount about that necessarily ourselves on farm. We can try, but with the amount of water that a cow drinks, the amount of water you need for washing up, water supply is a real major one, particularly with what's going on with the Murray-Darling at the moment. So.
And I'm with Beck. There's no silver bullets coming along, but there never has been. So I think the opportunity is for farms to focus on their own business. I think we've got this term industry, and it gets us all thinking industry. I just think your own business first, and industry follows. So the more focused on profitability, the more engaged we are in what new technology there is on farm, the more that will help young people see our farm future. And from the outside looking in, if farmers engage in whatever's on offer, especially things that we've invested in. We're very good as dairy farmers investing in our future through Dairy Australia and research, and the things coming along through Dairy Bio in forage, and it'll just be good business. We just need a process to get that new stuff into business. We've got a good extension network through Dairy Australia. It's available to all levy payers, so I'm just encouraging people to think about their own business and grab hold of whatever is in the pipeline. And there's heaps in the pipeline, and there's heaps already there. I'd just like to see a lot more farmers engage with it. And that will help, Andrew, with your job. If people are looking in and farmers are doing business plans and are taking stock, and it's good for our industry for that to be seen to be happening, and it's good for our industry if it does.
Yep, so start off with, start from the business level, and then obviously that really helps the whole industry.
Well, identifying, I guess, areas where you can improve. I mean, there's no point if you've got great conception rates on your farm, for example, to go, well, we're going to get activity meters to improve conception rates. If your conception rates are great already, you don't need to do that, but you might be falling down in another area. And, different farms have different requirements for technologies that are going to be useful to them. So it's about utilising the resources that are already there, and telling, R&D bodies like Dairy Australia what we actually need is important as well, so that they can put our levy money to good use in, producing new products or, yeah.
I think that's a really good point, that every farm is different. So different focus, different management, different regions, different stage of development. Every farm is different. So this term industry tends to put it all together a bit, so I'm just want to work from the other way up. So profitable farms will drive a healthy industry.
The opportunity is that if people understand their business and are making their management decisions, they are then in a much better position to collaborate and be able to work with processors, because they're on an even footing. The processors understand the cost of producing milk. There are some concerns about whether one of the bigger processors did a year ago, but for the most part they understand their business. So it's a little, taking Michael's point, it's a little bit about the future is dairy farms understanding their business and then being able to collaborate and identify what are the opportunities going forward on an even playing field. I will say that to me there's two areas, if we've got a minute. There is, and one of them goes to Beck's comment, there is so much information and so much data around, and one of the innovations is going to be how do we get the best from all the information. And a dairy every day generates huge amounts of data in terms of cow production, cow health, growth rates, pasture growth rates. There's all this data. How do we harness that and use that in developing our businesses? And the other area is in the area of robotics. Dairy farms use a lot of labour, and there's a lot of labour jobs, some of which there will be the opportunity to look at. It's blue sky, but look at, some of it's not blue sky, but look at, is there opportunities to automate some of it?
I think data collection's not blue sky. It's already in train with DataGene.
Yep.
And that's exactly what DataGene is. So in one spot, all the herd testing around Australia, all the data collated, and whatever we can extract out of that over years as we get better at it will be powerful.
Okay, what do you think is the long-term outlook for the dairy price?
For the dairy price, yeah, that is a big question. So for me, processors have got a bit of work to do understanding their supply base. So there's a gap there now, brought about by whatever. So for us to comment on that, I think it's a bit of a hard one. I feel the slight improvement we've got this year hasn't been a big jump up, which can lead to a big crash. I'm a bit hopeful it's going to slowly build better.
So a slower build is safer?
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling is going to happen.
Beck?
How long's a piece of string? Yeah, look, I I'm a naturally very cautious person, and I tend to be, I hope for the best and I plan for the worst. My partner and I do. My gut tells me to be very careful I think running out and getting yourself into more debt or anything like that might be something that you might want to check before you do it. I think the problem is at the moment that globally the economy is quite unstable. Globally, politically, the world is pretty unstable at the moment. And so for me, my gut instinct is saying just sit back and wait and see what happens. So I'm not really willing to make any kind of predictions whether it's going to go up or down or that's just me being cautious though. So
long term, I think there's some positives. I mean, we have a large part of the world that is in which there's an increasing middle class and an increasing interest in consuming dairy products. The challenge is that there are also parts of the world that can respond as rapidly as we can to that demand, and to me that's where the fluctuations come. So yes, there's opportunity, and I think there's real opportunity for South Australia, and we've done a bit of work about looking at, as has Dairy Australia, about looking at where those opportunities are and within the state. But we need the collaboration, and we need the feedback that Beck and Michael have highlighted in order to be able to smooth it a bit, to be able to make those good management decisions, because otherwise we will just see the cyclic, here's an opportunity, everyone rushes in, and then the bottom falls out of it. While the long term might be going up, there's a lot of volatility around that.
It feels to me like the supply in Australia is a question. So it feels to me like we need to know. It feels like there's milk shortage. It feels like we've got inefficient processes. It feels like we're not a growing industry. We can grow back. We can grow back to 12 billion litres. I'm sure we can, but we need a signal from processors.
The market, absolutely.
The market, that there is a place for that milk, and not so much around price. We need confidence that milk is required and it will make a stronger industry.
Now, just putting you on the spot here a little bit, South Australia tends to be paid export prices, even though it's primarily a domestic market. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yep, a bit, yeah.
A bit over half our milk goes into the domestic white milk market. So we are exposed to export, but not nearly as much as our eastern, Victoria and Tasmania.
Is that something you'd like to see change, to be paid for what the market actually is in South Australia?
I think it has to, and what's happening now with freighting milk in to the domestic market is just ridiculous. Like we need to have a price for the production we're doing. So if we're supplying domestic production, we need to have a price that reflects that. And it has happened a bit this year with some of the opening prices. They're Victoria plus freight, and some of those things are coming out, albeit only 1 year contracts, but they are coming out in contracts. So of course it should, and it slowly is.
And it goes back to the need for clarity and the need for processors to say this is what we're doing, and sharing their information and not relying on the fact that there's a lower price in Victoria and therefore we'll pay a lower price. And as Michael said, that's part of what's coming out, because there are other people buying milk now, and so some of those supplying the domestic market have recognised they need to pay more because there's more value in that product.
Thank you for coming in today.